Hello, my name is Antonio Patterson, and I am so happy to be here today. Now, this is episode 69 of the English Coach podcast, another self sponsored episode, but today is a little bit different because we are doing, or you are listening, to what is actually a video podcast. So, if you are listening to this podcast episode in your normal podcast player and you're a little bit curious as to how exactly it looks in my tiny little studio here in Berlin, you can just head on over to www.englishcoachpodcast.com and look for the show notes page for episode 69. All right, now why does this episode exist? I'm just going to go through the 5 things that I want to talk to you about today. Now, the first one is new categories for the show. The second one is an article that I wrote recently that I feel really strongly about, and I think I should tell you about it and how you can make sure that you get access to this article as soon as it's out. I also want to talk to you about a new cross promotional initiative that invites other podcasters, independent podcasters, and also independent trainers, such as myself, to my stage to share their story with my course participants, old and new, my listeners, and also with theirs. It's a new hot thing that a lot of podcasters are doing these days, and this is me trying my hand at it because, we have to take care of ourselves. Now, the other thing I want to talk to you about is the evolution of the English Coach podcast. I've been doing this now for 2 years, and things have changed. The drive, the original calling that motivated me to do this podcast, which has a lot to do with what I like to call the democratization of the learning experience, has not changed. I'm still doing this for my people. However, the character of how the themes will be put together, I suspect that this is going to change. And I just want to talk to you a little bit about that. Now, the last thing that I want to talk to you about is a rare event that took me to the stage in the spotlight, feeling like a star, then leaving the stage and almost breaking my neck when I got back to my seat. All right, so this promises to be an entertaining episode. Again, it's special because it's a video podcast and you can see what it looks like in my tiny little studio. As some of you know already, I'm also a photographer, or let's say I'm a hobby photographer. Sometimes I do it, however, in a professional way. And I say all of that to say this. I like to experiment with lighting. And today I'm experimenting with a black background and a black pulley and a black man with black hair and a black microphone. And that's not the easiest to light sometimes. So you will see how I managed to do this. And, I'm just going to tell you quickly. I have one big light here, front left. It's LED, by the way, so it's saving energy. On the right, I have a reflector. If you're watching, you can see where I'm pointing to. Behind me, a little bit above my head, there is also a kicker light, which is helping to separate me from the background and kind of show my shoulder outline. And there's also another kicker a little bit to my right on the side that's also helping to separate me from the black background. So that was a quick lesson there for anyone who's interested in shooting black skin against a black background, the black pulley and the black microphone. All right, so that was it. And that was me being a little bit crazy there, but I'm going to get straight into the topics for today. And the first one is these new categories that are now to be seen on the podcast page, www.englishcoachpodcast.com. Now, if you go under the podcast menu, you will now see top 3 and top 10. Now, I'm going to go into a little bit of what that actually means. Now, top 3 means that these are the episodes that have enjoyed the most download overall, or the most downloads overall. And this is from the beginning of my podcasting, which is, I think it was November 2019 up until now. these episodes were the most downloaded episodes. On the top 10, however, that's slightly different, because what that shows is the episodes that have had the most downloads within the first 30-day period, right? So these are the episodes that, well, you could say elicited the most excitement, or the episodes that people wanted to listen to the most quickly, so to speak, the episodes that were shared the most as soon as they were published. And it's a little bit different from the top three because it moves a little bit different. Those episodes will change in a different way from how the top three changes. So the question is, why is that there, right? And why am I telling you that at all? Well, if you decide to share the show with anyone, that is a good place to start. With the top three and the top 10, you can tell your friend, whoever you share the show with, or anybody who just happens upon the show, they will have a better idea of what the best episodes are. Right? Now, the good thing is that I feel comfortable with these episodes as well. And they're a little bit special because these episodes are very mixed, and the nature of the topics of these particular episodes, the top three and the top 10, also have a lot to do with the fourth thing that I'm going to talk to you about today, which is the evolution of the podcast show. Anyway, before I go there, I also want to talk to you about this article that I've written. I'm gonna mention it today because it's important to me. I started writing it about 5 days ago. And what that goes into is just a little bit about my experience in Germany as a foreigner, why I came here, some of the things that drove me, what I did, what was my plan B, and how my plan B became my plan A. And, some of the things I did to kind of position myself and put myself on the road to becoming a trainer of adults, and also some of the things that have influenced my doing what I'm doing now. I'm doing a podcast, I'm doing a video podcast, and I'm also doing training online, and I'm also offering so-called Stammtisch in virtual reality. The training that I'm doing online takes two forms, and they are in the form of private live streams and also courses that are pre-recorded that you can have access to if you choose to book a particular function or a particular grammar series. You can do that if you want. And these things are things that have developed, for the most part, I kid you not, from a hobby, photography. Yes, it is my preoccupation with photography that has led to these things. And also in Germany, we say autodidact, which is self-taught or DIY. It also talks about how I sought out these things by myself, picking out the knowledge that I needed to put myself on that road. And hopefully that example will help many people who might feel a little bit strange about probably starting podcasting or starting content creation or anything like that. It goes into how you can do it yourself, how you can do exactly as I did, put yourself on that road and develop your preoccupation, your hobby into something that is more useful for many more people, right? So that is what this article is about. It also goes a little bit more into the whole aspect of being an independent content creator and our experience with the larger platforms such as the Googles, the LinkedIns, the Instagrams, the Facebooks, or the Meta. Forgot that they've taken that name for themselves. But the experience of us as content creators might be a little bit different from what you expect. Whereas, I went in a little bit, respectfully, of course, because, these platforms have their place. I spoke a little bit about the fact that I don't really think that they care about most content creators. They want our content, of course, to pack full with advertisements and advertisements before, advertisements after, and advertisements on top or in the middle. And I don't particularly like that kind of ads driven paradigm. You choosing for yourself and deciding where you get your media from, and also us as independent trainers and creators putting our material out there, coming into direct contact with our listeners and our course participants ourselves. It also goes into the experience that some of us have working with or working for training platforms that, have the media muscle and the might, and, they can afford to make the big spend for ads and so on. A lot of these platforms who offer these training courses, and they kind of give the impression that it's from the trainers, but it's not really from the trainers. At the end of the day, after they take their pound of flesh, the trainer actually ends up with something like 16% of what is collected. So, that is not something that is particularly motivating. Sometimes I vent about it, sometimes I rant a little bit, and this is why, again, in saying that these platforms are good for their purposes, most of the social media platforms are actually advertising platforms, and a lot of the training platforms as well that offer you contact with trainers and so on. The deal that the trainers get is not really that good, right? And as I said, on average, the trainer might get 16% of what is taken in. So this new democratization of the learning experience is not just about you having the choice to decide who you work with and having the knowledge of the world in your pockets in the form of your smartphone and so on, but also the chance that you have to get to know your trainers via podcasting, via YouTubing, and all these things, and deciding for yourself who you want to work with. That is what I go into on that article. I try to still stay positive, but there are a lot of things that are not so nice, and I talk about these things, I write about these things, and I give myself some time to revisit some of these arguments. So again, it's an article that means a lot to me, and I'll invite you to have a look at that if you feel like. Now, the other thing that I wanted to talk to you about was, again, this cross promotion. What is this cross promotion? This cross promotion also ties into what I mentioned before, the democratization of the learning experience, which means that a lot of independent trainers, independent podcasters have opted to do their own thing. They've opted to put their own material out there, their own media data on their own platforms, and also try in all earnest to come into contact with their own people without gatekeepers in between. The democratization of the learning experience also means that we have the freedom to work with each other. So this cross promotion, it's not something against the Spotifys and the so on, the big guys, the Amazons and the Googles and the LinkedIns and all these media people, but it's about us helping each other. So the cross promotion initiative is about me, for example, inviting another podcaster who does a similar thing, has a similar audience, is of a similar persuasion, to enjoy my stage, to share his message, to share his tools and tips, also with his listeners, course participants, but through my stage. And he or they also do the same thing by inviting me to their stage. So, it's kind of like a cross-pollination that has to happen between us independents, because, most of us, we cannot afford the big spend. We can't really afford to pay to play sometimes. That is why we have to ask you, for example, to share the episodes. If you find one you like, or one person that might be interested in a show like this or might be interested in our service, then we ask you to share it. And we also have to do this kind of a cross promotion to help each other, because that's what we're left with. And it's actually not bad, it's actually quite interesting. The last episode 68 that I did with George, it is something that goes into accents and the stress that a lot of language learners put themselves under with the notion that they have to lose their accent, right? And we talk about some ways to get over that fear and also about self-acceptance and, the way to achieve fluency without, feeling too bad. And that is what this show is all about as well, encouraging people to find the confidence in different ways. Now, the cross promotion also speaks to Wanda. Wanda is also an independent trainer and a podcaster. She's a little bit more active on Instagram. So she will also be joining the cross promotion initiative, so to speak. And one particular thing that's very interesting about Wanda is the fact that also, like I do sometimes, I try to integrate art into the learning experience that I present to my course participants. She has taken art, an art form, which is a music form from the Caribbean. As I said, she's from the Caribbean, just like me. And she has created or started a festival of this music form in France. So the minute she takes my stage, right? That is what we're going to talk about. And I am sure you're going to find that also interesting because, as I said, it's a festival of a Caribbean music form that I am sure all of you are going to find interesting. The third guest for the cross promotion that is coming up for not episode 69, but for episode 70 is someone who is also of the same persuasion, also of the same calling. You will find his way very interesting, right? So please look out for that as well. I don't know if it's going to be a video podcast, maybe just a little, but it promises to be a good episode. So please do look out for that. Now, another thing that I wanted to talk to you about was the evolution of the English Coach podcast. Now, looking at the categories, top 3 and top 10, you will notice for yourself that a lot of the topics, they're not about English lessons. And as I've always said on my show, this is not an English lesson. It's called the English Coach Podcast, but what it means is that it's a podcast from an English coach for English lessons. If you know someone who's interested in lessons, or if anybody wants lessons, they can sign up for lessons from my podcast page. Right? I do offer lessons, private live stream, pre-recorded courses, virtual reality worlds, all these things I offer. I even visit firms sometimes. If you know anybody who wants that, they can sign up for lessons on the podcast page. It's actually also in connection with trainingtree.de. That's the website. But the podcast itself is not for lessons. The podcast is gonna be evolving more into the conversations with what I call real people on real topics, having to do with things that are close to the adult educational experience. It's about giving you examples of people who have managed to achieve the fluency, achieve the natural speech that most of my course participants want to achieve. The topics are also real, right? We talk about real things. It's not just about, learning grammar or anything like that, but it's about using the language to do real things. So many people are interested in the topics that we talk about, not just people who are trying to improve their English as a second language. So I just wanted to say that there's gonna be an evolution, and ever again and again, I will be reminding you of how it's changing a little bit, and it's not gonna be too much. Maybe I change at some point. Maybe I change the artwork, but I'm not quite sure if I'm gonna do that. Many things are gonna stay the same. Now, the last thing that I wanted to talk to you about today was this extra special event that happened at a place in Berlin called Scheinbar Berlin. Now, what happened is that I was invited to the stage, and I had the rare opportunity of sharing the stage with the host for the event. Now, I learned a lot from that event, and I want to share that with you. One of the things that I learned was that maybe having to do with the fact that I've been doing podcasting for a long time, and I've been teaching as well, in some ways taking the stage, and, my little podcast is also my own stage. But for some reason, I went onto the stage and I didn't feel in any way strange. I just went up there and I played the role. I didn't take myself too seriously. I gave myself the space to unfold, to enjoy the event, and to do my little thing. And, usually when I go to the stage, I just say, well, if anybody doesn't know what's good, then it's their problem. Okay, well, I don't really say that all the time, but, I have to tell myself certain things, because that was a little cocky, but I tell myself certain things so I feel okay taking the stage. And this is what I want my course participants also to feel when they decide to use English as a second language, or when they decide to do anything new for that matter. It doesn't have to be English, it can be any language. But in this journey towards fluency and this journey towards the confidence that we need to express ourselves, right? We need to find a way to just not take ourselves too seriously, not be too concerned with perfection, and to embrace what I like to call perfect imperfection. And I just felt good. I'm not doing any kind of advertisement for Scheinbar Schöneberg, but I found it so fantastic that I just thought I would share that event with you. You will see the photo right there or there. And, what happened was that the show host invited me up onto the stage to shower her with roses, and I showered her with roses, and I did it again, and she said do it again, and when all the roses were finished, I had to pick them up from the floor and do it again, and I did it with all pleasure, and it was wonderful and it felt great, right? That is the way I want my course participants to feel when they're using a language that is not their own. Now, you shouldn't get carried away though, because even though I did enjoy the stage, when I left the stage and got back to my seat, I almost broke my neck. There was something wrong with the well, actually nothing wrong with the chair, but I just touched on the wrong part and I almost fell. So, that was a rude awakening, so to speak, after my 20 seconds of glory. But that's not the main thing that happened. What happened was that it was wonderful and somebody was happy enough, or let's say, and somebody was nice enough to take that photo that I'm sharing with you. All right. Now, that was it. Those are the things I wanted to talk to you about. I hope you found it interesting. For those of you who came over to the show notes page to watch the episode, thanks for coming over. As you can see, there's some fantastic links there that you just get yourself familiar with them. If you want to share anything, feel free to click around and again, share the show if you want. And it was a real pleasure doing this, showing you my little studio, my working with the black background, and so on and so forth. And as I usually say on my podcast, with a small win is always a good way to begin, and bye for now.